Welcome to today's Soul Course, brought to you by GaiaWisdomSchool.org. Well, I want viewers to know that this is Lori. This is Lori Fry.
Hello.
And I'm Dakota. And do you want to introduce yourself? Like, what do you do in this life?
Oh, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Okay.
What do I do? I help businesses, I help people be happy in their work, but that's not really what I want to say. What do I do?
What do you do? I mean, okay, let's rephrase this, because one of the pieces that we're going to be talking about is what do you do and what do you want to do?
Mm-hmm.
So what do you do currently?
Oh, what I do currently is human capital work. So I help businesses get their people ready for big changes in their organizations. Mm-hmm. And all of my passion is around bringing dignity to work. Mm-hmm. And the conventional way of bringing dignity to work is helping people deal with change, because companies are changing their processes, they're changing their technologies, they're changing everything about how they do their work. And the last thing that usually comes along is how they help people adapt to the changes that are going on around them.
Okay, so if you were doing your ideal job, what would you be doing?
I would be doing what I'm doing now, but I think I would be doing it more for companies that have more of a soul, I guess, or you know, large companies are doing change all of the time, and it's more about corporate profits and you know, making a handful of people very wealthy, or delivering profits on Wall Street. What I really love to be doing is helping people, much like you, find the things that they're good at, be able to articulate what their personal brand is, and really help them build their confidence and kind of find their power in the workplace.
And so what keeps you from stepping into that fully?
Right now I'm just trying to bring all of that together. I think that there's an intersection of conventional management wisdom and conventional change management approaches, but there's this heart piece, and the heart piece is helping people find their power in that.
Right.
And I'm trying to give it a name.
So, in essence, to help other people find power, you have to step into yours.
Yes.
And what keeps you from stepping into your power completely and fully right now, today?
It's a very good question. It is a paradigm shift, really. I'm confident that when I step into my power, how I do my work will look really different. And while I'm still working in this conventional business space, that's where I make my money, right? And that's where my sustainability is right now. So making that shift will have an impact on my conventional workspace.
Right. So when you say sustainability, though, you're talking about sustainability in the context of groceries in the refrigerator, car payment paid, mortgage paid,
kids in college.
Kids in college. And so that sustainability is very much ingrained in that third dimension. And not that you're ego-driven, but it's driven in that ego mode where it says that we have to have X amount of dollars in the bank account.
Yes.
That says that we are safe. So if you took that out of context and looked at sustainability in a different prism and just changed it a little bit, like what does sustainability look like if you're looking at your soul? What does that look like?
Well, that's completely different. Yes. That is doing work that really feeds your soul while it's helping other people, rather than feeding your bank account.
And so if you were sustainable in your environment, would you be living in Columbus, Ohio? Or Florida?
Probably not.
You'd probably be here in the mountains with us.
Probably. Right over there.
Right over there. Would you, how does sustainability look spiritually to you?
How does it manifest, or how does it look?
How does it look?
Like, what do I do?
Yeah, like if you were to have that, like think of spirituality as being the thread that ties everything together. So your environment, your relationships, your job, your everything. And if you were living from a spiritual place, from being a spiritual being, then would you have the life that you live right now?
There would be aspects of it, but there would be more of those things. So,
Right.
for example, the work that I do with people individually, right? That's probably most all that I would be doing. That and writing about it and publishing on it. I would be doing less of the hiring myself out in the big ways that I do right now. Yes.
Right.
Yep. It would definitely change the decisions I make about where I work and how I make my money.
And so I think part of what happens for people is that they get into this place of fear where I'm afraid to step out of this paradigm that has been, the rock for so long. Like I've got to go to work 9 to 5. I've got to work for a company who's got benefits. I've got to have a retirement fund. I've got to have XYZ in the paycheck every week. I've got to be on this, this track for promotions, and it's this whole little game that people play. And I use that word game loosely because, for some people that is their passion. But for some people, like you, I feel, it's not their passion. The passion is you do that more in the context that that's what you've been taught and that's what has been kind of ingrained. But there's this struggle between that seed and the seed that's really within you that says there's something more.
Yes.
There's something more to this life than just a 401k. And it's being able to balance that where you've got that security, but you also are being able to follow your passion.
Right.
And that's hard for a lot of people because that requires a lot of trust in the unknown.
Yes, it does.
And it requires you to trust yourself.
Well, it's interesting that you say that too, because I've taken a tremendous amount of risk in the last couple of years, stepping away from my job and doing something that I thought was more socially beneficial, for lack of a better term. And in the moments where I said, I have no idea how I'm going to handle X, Y, and Z coming up. I'm just going to stand at the precipice and wait for it.
Yeah.
It always comes.
It always comes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I don't know where that doubt creeps back in, but it does, and that's.
Well, I think the doubt creeps in because that's what we've been taught as a society. That if it doesn't fit this mold, or then it doesn't fit in this box, then it can't be sustaining, and it can't be substantial, it can't be right.
Right.
Like, who follows their dreams? My God.
Crazy people.
Crazy people.
Yes.
And so when you kind of grow up in that mindset or that model, it's really hard to break free and feel like you're going to be anything but a failure, because we've been taught that breaking free of that system sets you up for failure.
Right. So it's in the deciding.
It's
where
in the
things
deciding.
really start to move. Right.
And paying attention. Like what you're doing right now, you're paying attention to those moments where you kind of break free and it is okay. You're taken care of. The universe steps in, takes care of you.
Yeah.
You're given what you need. And that kind of trust sometimes can feel like it's blind trust, but it's trust.
Right.
So I'm going to ask you one more time. Who are you?
Such a wide open question. I am someone who loves helping people find who they are and what they want to be in the world.
And what does that do for you?
Oh my gosh, it just, when I work with people on that level, it just makes my heart feel full And I think it really changes my whole state of being when I do that. Most everything else starts to feel like drudgery.
So if you can use that as your compass point, kind of like your true north, and when you start to veer away from true north, things start to become dark or difficult, or you start resenting or having those feelings of like, oh, you feel it in your body. And you start paying attention to when that compass starts to shift. And then you do whatever you can to bring it back to that center point. And I always talk about the 4 houses of sacred purpose, one being environment, your sacred relationships, your spiritual path, and then your job and career. Most often what people are trapped into is finding a career that it does not fit who they are, who their spirit is. So if you're in a situation where that can't be rectified right away, then you work on the other 3 houses so that you have that strength and that support and that foundation underneath you that helps you to manifest whatever it is in your career that needs to be shifted, changed, modified, morphed, whatever. And sometimes environment and career go in the same way, and I know this might be true for you because you're thinking about moving to Florida for a job. You're living in Columbus for a job. And so those two kind of come together. So you've got to look at, for you personally, probably your relationships, making them sacred, and creating that foundation of people who really feed into that part of yourself that feels good.
And I would say those two, my spirituality and my relationships, are the strongest right now. And so I definitely feel like my environment and my career are the weakest ones, and they are definitely intertwined. But that's a good point to continue to build the relationships.
Yeah, you continue to build them because those are like the yoke that helps pull forward the other two. Because there'll come a point where your relationships and your spiritual path will give you enough sustenance to allow you to feel that freedom to be able to experiment, and that strength, and that trust, and that willingness to do something that may break the complete mold that you've always known. And it may be moving up to the mountains, living in a one-room cabin and saying, okay, God, this is it. This is what I'm doing. I'm here. Show me my next path. And then because of that trust in your spiritual path, then you set up this incredible canvas that's blank in front of you. And the universe is excited because it's like, okay, finally, she has trusted enough to just let us do our job. This is what we're here to do. Your guides, spirit, universe, whatever you want to call it, then calls in the Calvary and says, okay, let's get to work. Let's make her a believer.
Well, I'm ready for the Calvary.
Okay, well.
When can I move in?
And sometimes it takes just having a creative mind too. Like, okay, I may not be able to do this, but how could I make that happen?
Yeah.
And thinking out of the context that, it has to look a certain way.
Well, and that's right. And it's like you start to think down that path, and then suddenly I start thinking of the realities of life, right? I have a daughter. I still have to get through high school. I've got 2 kids to get through college. So it isn't necessarily practical to do what looks like the big leap, but there are probably many little sub-leaps I can start taking.
Right. And I also think, as for parents especially, parents have a certain responsibility that they pass on to their kids. I want to pay for your college. I want to be able to make sure that you're set up and things like this. And I just read an article from Elton John and his husband, and they have 2 boys. And Elton John said, he's worth probably billions at this point. And he said that he is not leaving one single dime to his kids because he wants his kids to grow up knowing that you have to work hard for your money, or you have to do what you need to do to make your own, because that builds your own self-esteem instead of having it given to you. Because I don't want kids who have a silver spoon given to them. And at first I was like, whoa, that's kind of harsh, because you've got millions and millions of dollars. But then I started thinking about it. It's like, that's really advantageous to the kids, because then they are given a gift that's far greater than money. They're given the gift of trust that they could do the same thing in their own accord. So I say that to parents that, it'd be nice to pay for your kids' college. What if they don't want to go to college?
That's their choice.
Right. So you've worked all this time, made all this money, saved all this money, and then they get to the point and say, I don't want to go to college. So you've just given up half your life.
That's very true.
And then there's the other way of looking at it, that, there's student loans, and, who wants to be in debt with student loans, but you hopefully go to, looking forward in the future that maybe college will be free for Americans, like every other country in the world. Yeah. But there's other alternatives out there for them,
right,
to be their own person, to stand on their own 2 feet. And, if you can kind of look at it, the bigger picture of that, and take that pressure off of you, it just kind of releases the steam a little bit, so that you can step back and say, okay, what's in my best interest? Because what greater gift do you give to your kids than you following your passion?
Right. Sort of the airplane analogy of putting your oxygen mask on first. Right.
Yeah. Because if you teach your kids that no matter what the paycheck looks like, you follow your heart and your passion, you'll be taken care of. You'll be successful.
Right. We've seen some of that. Good.
So that was a long introduction to who you are, but
are we just getting started now?
Well, I think that in this soul session, and because we're going into the East direction, which is all about vision and dreams and your sacred purpose and all those things that drive you forward, is that mental body. You're planting the seeds that are fresh, that you're going to start growing your own garden. That this is a great time to talk about sacred purpose and, why do we live the lives that we live?
Yeah. And it's very easy to kind of lose the magnetic north, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just what I call it. We do our jobs, we do them for years, and we just sort of forget that we're just kind of putting one foot in front of the other.
Mm-hmm.
And when you step back and do like the sacred purpose course, that has been really eye-opening for me, to just stop and think for a minute. Am I really enjoying this or not?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And what do I really think about my house, and what do I really think about my spiritual practices? And by the way, what do I think about these relationships I've had for the last 20 years?
Yeah.
Right? Are they really? I think sometimes it feels selfish to say, is this something that's really serving me? But it's an important question, because if it's not, to your earlier point, if it's not feeding you, then how good can you be for anybody else?
Right. Yeah, and especially in relationships. Julie Cameron, in The Artist's Way, she talked a lot about crazy makers and poisonous playmates. And we all have them. It's those people that just drive you batty. And for a long time, the way I got introduced to this book was I had a partner who was reading it, and a couple of her friends who were, they're all artists. None of them could get past chapter 3 for whatever reason. So I said, and I was teaching workshops, so I thought, I'll read it and I'll form a workshop around it. I went through that book 13 times with 13 different groups of people, and saw 13 different groups of people go through all these tumultuous things, including myself. But one of the biggest things for me, and the takeaway, was looking at the crazy makers in my life. And there was one in particular, who was my father, who was one of my crazy makers, that I couldn't just say, "You're out of my life, Dad." but I had to learn to react to him differently. And it took 4 rounds through the book, mind you. But I started reacting differently to his little jabs. And when I got to the point where I could master that, where I mastered my own feelings, where it didn't affect me the way that it did, he stopped doing it because I wasn't giving him the same satisfaction. And our relationship drastically changed.
Wow.
So, sometimes it isn't necessarily about getting rid of the people in your life, it's just changing the dynamics of a relationship. Seeing them differently, taking your power back from them.
Yes.
And for me, that was with what was happening with him. Is he knew exactly what button to push to get me angry, and it worked every single time. And then when it didn't, he stopped doing it. It's like, wait a minute,
That's not fun anymore.
It's not fun anymore. What changed here? So being able to just kind of step back and look at everything just from a different prism. Be curious about it.
Not taking those things for granted, that they just have to be the way that they've always been.
Yeah, it doesn't always have to be that way. But sacred purpose, and this time of the year, it's such a great time to really focus on that and where you're heading and kind of assess what your life is, doing that assessment sheet that's in the workshop. And it's entailed. I make you go through every single crevice of your life.
Yeah, that took a while.
Yeah.
And it was hard, and I found myself, when I would hit resistances in certain areas, I would be inclined to put the pen down. And then I realized it wasn't going to help me at all if I didn't work through it. And then coming back to it on the shadow side, right, that was even harder. But being on the other side of that now, I feel like I have some very specific things that I can be doing. But it's not easy work.
It's not. But most good things aren't. So, and we'll wrap this up here in just a second, but do you feel that there is anything, how can I word this? My goal is always to try to meet people where they are. And is there any kind of deficit that you feel could be filled by something external to you? Does that make sense?
Keep talking for a
minute.
In this moment or in general?
In general, like in your sacred purpose work. And being able to, what really holds you back? That's what I really want to know.
Yeah, the void for me, and we've talked about this a little bit, is this whole feeling of success is good enough for everybody. It's good for everybody else, but I'm not good enough to achieve just a success that I can't even imagine. And there's no reason for it, because if I have all the business acumen and tools to help other businesses be successful, then I should be be doing it myself, right? But it's like the vision board, why am I afraid to put that together? And I think it is, somewhere along the way that I internalized that it's good for everybody else, but not for me. Or, everybody else is worthy of that, but I'm not. So my big shadow piece that I need to work on is valuing myself and realizing that I am as worthy as anybody else of, being content, whatever content means.
Yeah.
And I think part of, as I kind of work through it mentally, I think it is more about me getting clear on what contentment looks like. So that it's not a big ambiguous thing. It is this is the bridge that I'm crossing now.
That self-love piece is a huge one for people.
Huge. Yes.
And it's, just in the work that I do, I feel like that's probably the number one biggest block for people, is learning how to love themselves enough and as much as everything external to themselves.
I think I'm in the... Hello, Izzy.
Hello, Izzy. Hello.
Well, thank you for standing up. Now you don't have to pan down.
Yes, you're so sweet. Well, you have it all together. Dogs have it all together. They know exactly how to live.
I was just going to say, I think that I've come a long way in this area, and the reason this last piece is so hard is because it's the last bit for me. And I'm not expecting some panacea on the other side, but I think when I get there, I will have some sense of relief.
Yeah.
And it will feel authentic. I've been at places in my life where I've thought, oh, I'm really content, but it always feels like the bottom's going to fall out. And I think when I get there, I won't feel like the bottom's going to fall out anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's, and that is the moment you step out of that third dimensional ego and into that fourth dimension spirit. You live from the heart. And when you can really navigate through your life from that heart space, it looks so different.
Yeah.
And it's, and I feel like I vacillate between the two. Like I have those moments where I fall back into that, oh my God, are we going to be able to do X, Y, and Z? And then, oh my God, this is amazing, and how could it be any different? But it's, being able to step fully into that heart space experience, and it's scary because it's so foreign to people.
It is.
So going forward, what are you going to do? What's your next step?
Oh gosh. Well, my next steps are to finish the Sacred Purpose course because I'm not finished with it. And just one or two things. I want to do a couple of things that are really more about valuing myself. And we talked about some of this, choosing a couple things to work on for mastery, just for myself.
Yeah.
And I want to get clear on what my next business move is, or how I'm going to break into this area and really just define what it is. And it sounds like it's a lot and it's big and ambiguous, but it's clearer than it sounds.
Yeah.
I'm close.
You're close. So I want to kind of pull in some of the people who are going to be watching this and get them kind of involved too. And what kind of questions really kind of draw out what that next step is for people. I know a handful of people who are going to be watching this, and I know where they are in their journey, and self-love is a big piece of it. And I love the good soul work. It's kind of like I should have been a teacher in the last life. Why am I a teacher in this
You're a
lifetime?
teacher.
Dang. I think one of the biggest questions I have for people is, and this goes back to my grandmother, Isabel, who was very instrumental in my life. And one of the things that she used to always ask me, I would go, for all of her life she lived in California, and that was, she was everybody's grandmother. She was definitely a light in this world. And she moved to Ohio to be closer to our family, and then we kind of all graduated and whatever, dispersed. But I would go down to her house. This is when I was living in Columbus, and I was in my early 20s, and I was really I was actually doing IT work for the limited company, and I was working in a fluorescent building, 65 degrees and no windows, and it was just horrible. And I would go down on the weekends to see Grandma, and she would ask me, what did you do this week? And and the truth was, I went to work, I came home, I watched the news, took the dog for a walk, put something in the microwave to eat, went to bed, got up and did it all over again. And that was my life. And I always felt guilty saying that kind of stuff to Grandma because she was all so very excited about, what did you do? What did you do? And I'd say, well, and I'd try to draw out whatever I could. I took Kaylee to the dog park, and we met another dog, and she really liked her, and it was like dragging stuff out of me to kind of make my life sound somewhat exciting. And at the end of every conversation, she never judged. She would just look at me, and she'd nod her head, she'd smile, and she'd say, "Are you happy?" well, and I think I talked about this in the Sacred Purpose workshop that, for a long time I would lie to her and say, yeah, I'm happy, it's good, it's, whatever. But the truth was I was so dead inside. And I tried to put on this facade that looked okay. And especially for her, because I didn't want her to worry about me or be disappointed or whatever, things were. And it took a long time before I could come around to a place where I could look her in the eye and say, you know what? I am happy. I am doing everything that I love to do. And it all started when I decided that, screw this. And I went against everybody's idea of what was normal, I decided it was January in 1991, and I was watching the news after one of these days at work, and the hottest place in the United States was Tucson, Arizona. And it was, I'll never forget, it was 89 degrees that day there, and it was like 5 degrees where I was. And I said, I'm moving there in 1 week. Actually, it ended up being 3 weeks, but I said, I am moving there. And everybody thought I was crazy. I had $300 to my name. I had no job. I had nothing. And I went down to tell my grandma, and she smiled and she says, is this going to make you happy? I said, I don't know. But I think so. It's warm. And I did it, and it was the best thing that I ever did in my life. But her question to me over all those years, are you happy, was kind of like my true north. It's like, do I do something, does it feed my soul? Is it making me happy? Do I feel like I'm contributing to the world? Do I feel like I'm making a difference? Do I feel like if I were to die today, would I have died with that song inside of me, or did I sing it? And she, in that simple little question, taught me that whatever you do in this life, if you're happy, you're following that sacred purpose. And that's all that matters. It doesn't matter if it works out. If I had gone to Arizona and completely flopped, I would have learned something from it.
At least you knew you did everything that you could.
Exactly. I don't have any regrets. I don't sit there with that, what if I had just moved to Arizona? What if? And so when I teach the sacred purpose piece of things, I always refer back to her because, and she may never know, I'm sure she does because she's in the spirit realm, that in some way, just that gentle guidance was enough to get me to a place where I could look at my life a little bit differently, and I could hear her in the back of my head saying, are you happy? And I heard it one day when I was, when I was working for the Limited, I was in the collections agency, part of it. And they have these big machines that fold, and the bills, the collection bills that go out to people, thousands and thousands and thousands every single night. All these people who are in debt.
Oh.
And I'm sitting there gathering all their bills, and I'm putting them in the bins. And I remember doing this one night, and it was cold, it was the fluorescent lights and the hum of the computers, all these people's energy of all these people owe money to this one company. And I heard her in the back of my head saying, is this what's making you happy?
Wow.
I'm like, oh, man, I don't think I can do this anymore. And it was about 2 weeks after that I walked away from that job and said, I just can't. I can't. It's raping my soul. And so that would be my question for anybody who's watching this is, look at the different things that you're doing in your life, your relationship. Are you happy? Your spiritual life, the time that you spend connecting with spirit, does that make you happy? Does it feel fulfilling? Is it enough? The job that you go to every single day, are you happy? Is it fulfilling? Are you making a difference in the world? Where you live, when you come home at night after being at this job that has basically, for some people, raped them all day long? Do you come home and feel, man, this feels like home? This feels good. And if you answer no to any of those questions, then there's something that needs to shift and change.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Your grandma's a wise woman.
She was. She was a piano teacher.
Hmm.
She had a passion for classical music, and she has like all these programs that were signed by Beethoven and Horowitz and all these people, and she followed her passion. She became a piano teacher, and that's all her life revolved around.
Beautiful music.
Yep,
Mm-hmm.
beautiful music. So what music are you creating?
Good talk.
Good talk.
Thank you.
Thank you for the hope and the love.
Yes. And the hop.
And that your journey is unfolding exactly as it should be. Thank you. We have to have outtakes.
That's right.
Because what video is fun without outtakes?
The dog will fart. Something will happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Or you will.
It has been known to happen at the worst possible times.
There's your outtakes.